Welcome to the Think Fitness Life podcast, where the mind and gym come together to help you live your best life. Hosted by two fitness professionals and your personal trainers, Matt Gluckman and Eric Menchie. All right, welcome back again, folks. This week's topics are regeneration, stability and hypermobility, and body composition. Those are our three topics this week. We're going to talk about our weekly workout first, and then we'll end with our food for thought. Our weekly workout was designed by Eric. He's a mad scientist in the way that he likes to torture people with cardiovascular activity and aerobic machinery, we'll call it. This can be done outside on your own bike, but for all intents and purposes, we'll assume that you have access to a gym. So 10 minutes of your heart rate at 150 to 160. You're either on a stair mill or a bike or a treadmill or an elliptical, and you're getting after it a little bit. You're leaning on the gas pedal a little bit. 10 minutes, hop off. You're going to do 3 rounds. I want TRX rows, I want dips, and I want ab wheel rollouts. I want 10 reps of everything. And then you get back on the bike, the stair mill, the elliptical, the treadmill, another 10 minutes at 150 to 160. Then you hop off another 3 rounds of 10 TRX rows, 10 dips, and 10 ab wheel rollouts. And then the final 10 minutes, again, heart rate between 150 and 160. You're working your aerobic system. You're going to be pretty. I'm not going to lie. This sucks. This is not a fun workout. I'm not one who enjoys it. Maybe you're someone who really likes that type of activity. But I was a soccer player at heart, so we're really driven by chasing a ball or chasing a person down, not on a bike or a stair mill. And I do like being outside more. So, if you have a way of checking your heart rate, a smartwatch or a H7 polar strap, do it outside. Going to be much better for you. You're going to get vitamin D, going to get vestibular processing, that Z axis. And again, you're building that aerobic base because this is part of your conditioning workout. We did a lot of weight training workouts in our weekly workout, and now this is an aerobic base for your weekly workout, and we'll eventually get into a glycolytic version of this and then a creatine phosphate into your sprints version of this.
Because if you're not a big aerobic person, 30 to 40 minutes straight at a steady state, not me, and we know, Matt, you're not, it is great because it breaks it up. Even if you're outside on a track, you can do 10 minutes on the track. Hey, we're going to stop. We're going to do some abs. We're going to do some push-ups. We're going to do some lunges. When you're doing that circuit in between, you're still going to get the heart rate to have a response. So it's still going to be up in the aerobic zone. You're just not in that running pace. So that you start back into running and 10 minutes, come back. You're now working your aerobic system differently, and you're getting some strength movements and full body movements in there too. That's why I love these exercises. That's why I love these aerobic days. And especially for people who don't just want to sit on one machine for 20 to 30, 40, 50 minutes. It doesn't have to be that. You can make these fun. You can break them up.
We're kind of playing it fast and loose with the word fun, but there's definitely ways of making it so that you can stay engaged and present, because I think a lot of times people do cardio and they're not really working anything. They might be burning an extra calorie a minute, and they might be getting a little sweat and burning a little bit more calories that day in general. But for the most part, a lot of times people are just going through the motions. I see them up there with their book or their phone. They're watching something. And yeah, it sucks. But what sucks even more is trying to be a multitasker and actually failing at doing both. What I mean by that is, you're probably not that engaged into what you're reading or watching, and not retaining that much, and you're not really getting anything out of your time on that treadmill or elliptical or bike or stairmill, wherever you may be. So do yourself a favor, stay engaged, stay present, suffer through that, and then go on and read or watch something and relax. But don't try to cross paths that way. Just get in, get it done. Be disciplined on yourself, and make it challenging. Or else, if you're not challenging, you're not really going to be changing your body, or creating a training effect so that your body is promoting itself to get stronger on a cellular level, which we'll talk more about getting into regeneration, because I love this topic because there's so many ways to talk about regeneration, renewal. Um, Eric and I are really used to talking to people about their time outside of the gym, because a lot of times people forget that there are 168 hours in a week, and they might only be working out for 5 of them if they're lucky. That's if, say that they're going 5 times a week, and they get a 45-minute workout in with time to shower and stuff like that. There's 163 other hours that your body is, quote unquote, regenerating and preparing for its next vigorous workout, whether it be aerobic or weights. Um, but one thing I want to talk about before we get into stress, sleep, and diet is on a really particle level. Again, back to a cellular level. Your body is constantly renewing itself and constantly regenerating. And I wanted to just throw these facts out there for people because I think it's really interesting and paradigm shifting. So there are 100 billion new red cells born every day in your body. 100 billion new red blood cells every day in your body. There are 600,000 particles of skin that leave your body every hour. That's why you have a vacuum cleaner, right? There's a new stomach lining built every 5 to 6 days in in your gut, right? In your body. And your liver replaces itself every 6 weeks. Eyebrows come in and are renewed every 4 months. So your body is constantly doing this uh, in out process of particles out, particles in, and regenerating its foundation, its organs, its skin. I think a good way of thinking about this, at least what first came to mind when I was first learning about all this stuff, is water. Water is H2O. So at its forms, it's 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. In reality, if you look at a glass of water, it's part H2O, some part just hydrogen ions, and some part oxygen ions. And what's happening is it's constantly going through that cycle. So it's creating itself and breaking itself down. And it's constantly in that flow of having some free floating hydrogen ions, having free floating oxygen ions. They come together and make H2O. As they come together, another H2O has broken apart. And it's constantly doing this. And there's H3 and negatively charged oxygen ions, and they constantly are interchanging to create this what we see as water. And that's what our body is doing. Is if you could physically see these particles coming on and coming off, you would see it that we are constantly regenerating and being renewed and restored every day, essentially. So. We'll talk in layman's terms of why it's important to um, have sound practices that influence those changes.
And you bring up a very, very good point with this regeneration, where a lot of people will seem like I did, or most of the time you do, with okay, regeneration, regrow muscle, feel better, feel less tired. But at the cellular level, I mean, we're regenerating. We're re is basically a prefix saying, hey, again and again and again. This is what we're continuously doing, and this is what the body is going to do. Even look at the proteins in our body that we take in proteins, it breaks it down, it takes those proteins, the building blocks, adds them with other proteins, recreates and regenerates new proteins for your body to basically make all those cells you talked about. And this is an ongoing process. So for us, if we interrupt this process, where does that lead us to? Well, I mean, we can go down roads of diseases, dysfunctions, and it all because we're not doing a good enough job at this regeneration thing and taking care of how the processes of regeneration should take place in our body.
Yeah, I think what I want to highlight, just based on what you said there is like in our own body. Like our body already does this stuff. We don't really have to like teach our body how to do it or teach it how to, you know, repair something. We just have to be more aware of how it does it
Mm,
and help set our body up for success. So, for example, is I think a good example is breaks in the way we eat. Too often are we really stuck in this cyclical nature of eating out of habit, and you eat 3 to 4 meals a day, 7 days a week, indefinitely, and in every religion and culture, there is some type of fast built into the culture and the belief system because it was almost like a break for your body to have to process everything that was coming in and letting it say, no, let me do some house cleaning, let me do some in-house internal uh, systems that we already have that we haven't really been able to utilize because we've been so busy at sorting and repairing and partitioning fuel from everything you're putting in our system. So by giving yourself a little bit of a break in eating, your body goes through autophagy, which is a really beneficial regenerative tool that says, okay, we have limited resources at this point now. You know what? Let's get rid of these sick, pre-diseased looking cells, these weaker cells. We actually are going to tell them to kill themselves. It's called cell apoptosis. It's constructed cell death. It's almost like a way of your body helping to allot resources accordingly to the stronger, healthier cells. I mean, are there any gardeners or planters out there? The best way to take care of your plants is pruning them. Anytime you have a dead root or a dead leaf, you help trim it off the plant or the tree so that the tree doesn't waste resources sending it down a pathway that's already dead. And it's the same thing with your bodies. It says, you know what? We have limited proteins, limited fats. We're going to fortify and strengthen the already strong cells and a lot this information or these resources to promoting our body being the best version of itself. So even when we're talking about autophagy, we're usually talking about being in fasted states. You also are getting what's called your stem cells. Stem cells production increases when you're in these fasted states, and when you see autophagy, when you see blood markers for autophagy working in someone's system, you also see stem cells being produced. And stem cells are your youngest, most pliable cells. So it's like your body is saying, all right, we're doing some repairs here. We're tearing down this wall. It looks like it's going to go. We got to get rid of this foundation board. It looks like it's rotted out, and we're going to create some fresh planks. We got fresh wood, fresh materials here to fortify and strengthen these new areas. So there are, and I know this was a long-winded uh, rant here, but there are so many ways that your body already regenerates that all you need to do is be more cognizant of them and be more helpful in
right. Yeah.
stimulating.
And that's what we're here today to do. It's not about, okay, hey, we can't really change how we regenerate internally. I can't tell my cells or think like, hey, I want this cell to do this and that cell to do that. It doesn't happen. Our bodies just innately kind of know. So how do we get to that? What are ways to get those signals out in a good way? And that's one of them. Basically, a lot of people think of regeneration as, oh, eating, eating, eating. Yes, eating the right foods will help in regeneration, but also at the same time, the body's built miraculously and efficiently. Without eating, it will clear out the things in the cells it doesn't need so the strong cells can survive. If we don't do that, things become problematic. So that is one way of regeneration. Very similar to if you're working out, you're lifting, and you want to maintain muscle mass, a goal is to need intake of adequate protein so you can build those muscle cells to where you want them to be. You break down the muscle fibers, you need proteins to replace those. More protein will equate to that. They'll lay down the structures for what you need to do, build the muscle. You can move the weight heavier, you can run faster, you can hit the ball farther over the fence. You can kick a ball farther, whatever it needs to be. But that's how our system works. And there's so many ways that we can get regeneration in through eating, through sleep, through relaxation methods. There's a lot of things that we probably won't get to cover a lot today help toward regenerations. And then even then, we still want to help regenerate our central nervous system and our nervous systems. It all plays a giant role in. And I like where you go with autophagy because our nervous system's kind of intertwined with our digestive system. I mean, we have nerve signals going forward and back between those two. And if one is super stimulated, overstimulated, say with poor quality food, inflammatory food, how do you think that nervous system's going to regenerate? Not too well. So, kind of bringing it back to the autophagy, if we have that, it kind of says, hey, our digestive system is on point. It's on track. Okay, it can tell our nervous system we're in a good spot. We don't have inflammation. Send a signal to the brain as you can release good, healthy neurotransmitters, hormones, all this stuff. We don't need to be on attack mode and fight whatever's coming in.
Yeah, food definitely plays a big role in terms of regeneration, in terms of repairing and having energy allotted, in terms of having glycogen stored ready for a workout the next day. Menchie talked about central nervous system restoring itself and recovering, and that one's going to be important with sleep. There are a couple levers you can pull here: sleep, stress, diet, and then just facilitating like self myofascial release. So if we talk about food, more often than not, it's not necessarily what we are eating that's going to help our regeneration the most, but it's gonna be more about what we're not eating, because a lot of times people are eating more things that contribute to their lack of recovery than the fact that they ate stuff to promote them to recover. Because in terms of recovering and having a muscle ready or system ready, you want a good adequate level of proteins and fats and your starches, carbohydrates, if you will, in somewhat of a ratio setup. But a lot of times people just eat a bunch of garbage and it creates more problems in their system, more things for their body to have to process and get rid of. And then it actually sets up a situation where sometimes we're actually storing more fats rather than partitioning for energy that's going to be used more readily, be more readily available. So think about that next time when you're looking at the stuff that you
And
eat.
I like the
Is
way you put that.
don't Yeah, don't, because a lot of times people will just like, and I've fallen into the trap too. I've done it too, where you eat like a big nice meal post workout, and then you just eat a bunch of shit the rest of the day. Like it's an excuse. Like, well, at least I ate clean
Yeah,
for my post workout
right.
meal, and then they wonder why their next morning they have a really shitty workout.
Exactly. Or that you get the people who, hey, I burnt 350 calories on the elliptical today. I get to eat these pretzels that are 100 calories in this bag. No,
Yeah,
it doesn't. No,
yeah.
it doesn't work like that.
Not
Because
do yourself any good. Yeah.
going forward, we want to think of food as helping us regenerate, to regrow healthy cells, to regrow and reevaluate the healthy metabolic process of our body. It can't be looked at as just like I did this and burnt this, now I can have that. That's not a good way to look at it, because the body doesn't care about numbers that way. It cares about how it can get itself back to a healthier version that was prior to what you just stimulus you put it through, so the stress of a workout, and then how can it be better. And it's the same thing on, if it's not a workout, say regeneration, you had a stressful week at work, that is your body's going to figure out, okay, how do we build up and become better and healthier than we were. If you continue down that stressful path, it becomes a cascade of poor choices and bad things that can happen through hormones, through neurotransmitter in the body. But that's why sleep is important, because we need to take and de-stress those levels from us. Take those levels down. Basically shut the body down for a bit. Sleep is very important for that aspect of letting the body do nothing. And it's very hard nowadays in society, especially in this country. Sleep numbers are dropping. People aren't getting enough sleep. And sleep's important because as we go through the day, just like let's take a bicep curl. So you're doing a bicep curl. Let's say we're doing 15 reps. The first 8 to 10 reps aren't too bad. By rep 10, you start feeling a little fatigue. And then what happens 10 through 5? You get buildup of fatigue. Those last 2 reps are very challenging. The brain works the same way. Throughout the day, as we go, adenosine builds up in the brain. And when that builds up, that triggers tiredness. And at the end of the day, that's why we feel so tired. So when we sleep, our brain basically clears those levels of adenosine out, and that's what keeps it healthy. Now, if we don't get adequate or enough sleep, those levels never get cleared out. So we basically have adenosine hanging around in the brain, and studies have shown that it's linking to type 2 diabetes of the brain. So we're talking dementia, Alzheimer's, metabolic pathways that break down in the brain. And that's important. So sleep is very important to all regenerative aspects of the body.
Yeah, I was just gonna get into that. I'm so happy you segued into it because we're gonna have to move on to stability here in a second. But some of the other levers, right? Like sleep, stress management. We talk about things like meditating or journaling. Are going to play a huge role, especially in the way that your central nervous system will recover, or just your energy systems being ready to be most efficient. But I love how Messi talks about mostly the brain because it's so true. Um, when we sleep is when our body cleans out the most of these plaques and inflammatory markers in the brain to allow us to be more clear-headed and function better, right? It's almost like we get little dust spots on our motherboard and near our processor, and it's just preventing the proper firing of our systems. um, Little fun fact is curcumin,
Mm.
um, in most curry dishes, is one of the only anti-inflammatory compounds that can get through the blood-brain barrier and help with inflammation in the brain. Another fun fact about sleep: if you are eating between, so if the last thing you ate and then to the time you go to bed, if that's not at least 4 hours, you are forfeiting a lot of inflammatory cleaning time in your first REM cycle. Because here's what happens: your body is taking a lot of energy and using a lot of blood to digest food. When you're sleeping and you're still digesting, and they say you want to stop eating 4 hours before bed because you get into your first and deepest REM cycle, and that's when you do the most what's called brainwashing, right? Cleaning out those inflammatory amyloid plaques and other tissue that's building up in the brain in that first REM cycle. If that blood is already helping digestion, you don't have it to help the brain. So by stop eating 4 hours before bed, you free up more basically like transport vehicles, like buses. Think of your red blood cells as buses transporting nutrients to where they need to go and helping pull out waste away from the brain, right? You have more of those available for that first REM cycle. So you get more out of that REM cycle and you're going to wake up more refreshed. Another thing that can play a role in preventing the cleaning out of your brain is keeping the Wi Fi on at night. And now that we are 5G, it's pretty much um, all hell is broken loose for everybody now. But if you have the ability to shut your Wi-Fi off at night, those small signals can actually reverberate on the cellular level and reverberate particles and add vibrations into your brain and into your cells in general and can prevent from proper cleaning. So it goes a long way. I do it all the time, and I'll even ground myself. I have like a little, it's like a grounding pad. You plug it into your the grounding port in your outlet, and I just lay it on my bed, and I have my feet on it while I'm reading before bed, and because you're charged, you have charges going through your body all day long, and you can even test it out if you have like a little voltmeter, and you can stand in your yard with shoes on and then take your shoes off and put your feet directly on the ground. It's called earthing, and then your charge should be back to zero because you've gotten rid of your electrical charge. But so yeah, sleep plays a major role in the way that your system's recovered or not. And then stress can also prevent you from recovering properly because cortisol is actually going to do the opposite of what you normally want to do with an exercise with a weight training regimen. You normally want to build lean muscle, break down fat. Cortisol, the major stress hormone, is actually going to do the opposite. It's going to break down muscle, it's going to store fat. But that's enough ranting about regeneration. I really think we'll be revisiting this topic in the near future, especially if we get some questions from people that help steer it in one way or the other. But this is just such a big topic. And but let's move on to stability. We covered mobility in the last weeks here. Everything from working our way up, ankle, hip, thoracic. We talked about mobility needed for a squat, for a deadlift, and then shoulder mobility for your benches. And then we wanted to talk about stability and hypermobility because I think we want to stay in the middle. We want to stay balanced and have good mobility, but we want to talk about the issues on the extremes and what happens when you get too mobile and what happens when you are not mobile enough. So hypermobility is basically like being too flexible and that joint doesn't have the strength that it needs and you actually can risk injury. There's actually two people at my gym that were doing back bends, like yoga wheel, I guess you call it, where you are, hands you're on your back, your hands are underneath your shoulders, and your feet are down on the ground. And you're driving your belly button up to the ceiling, and so yeah, two different people did back bends so aggressively that they actually fractured a part of their vertebrae on their spine. So it's like
Nice.
too mobile. I know, like you. So basically, for to make this simple, is if you do yoga every day, you need to add some strength training in there and stabilizing joints. And if you weight train every day and you have great stability but no mobility, you need to do some yoga every now and then. That's kind of the
But
bottom line.
you have to look at the requirements for movement. So yoga requires a great deal of range of motion. So it requires your joints to move through and articulate through the joint capsule a lot. And that's why yoga can be tough for some people because they just don't have that range of motion yet. And that's where if you do yoga long enough, you can create extra range of motion. You can create more mobility because you're influencing joints and tissues. It can be a good thing. It can also be a bad thing. Too much of anything is most likely always going to be a bad thing. So if you're just doing yoga consistently every day, 365, you're probably going to get levels of hypermobility. So you're going to be able to push past ranges of motion that aren't normal for the human body. And that's why you see a lot of these people are very flexible, but don't think that that needs to happen. And on the other side, if you have too much stability and no movement of that, so stability is basically our control of how we move. So stability is important because it keeps joints in control, and that will help articulate other joints and keep them in control as we move. But if we have too much stability and we can't move, then you're stiff. And I think that's a big thing to realize is stability is important because stability is about control. Think motor control. If we have stable joints, then the joints above or below should have the appropriate mobility to move in correct degrees, movements forward, back, side to side, and rotate. But when we lose control, that becomes a problem.
I love how you bring control into it because I was literally going to read a quote that I had found from some doctor on this website that's like boneandspine.com. And but you basically said the same exact definition. You said it in a much more understand a much easier way to digest
Throw the quote up. What's the
way.
quote?
Stability is defined as the ability to maintain control of joint movement or position by coordinating actions of surrounding tissues and the neuromuscular system.
That is beautifully written. Well,
Well, I still don't understand it. I'm just kidding. But the way you say it, I think is a lot more digestible for people in terms of understanding that it's not just about this flexibility, range of motion, forcing your body into this position. It's about literally having the motor control and being able to articulate whatever you're trying to do around the joint that you're trying to
yes.
use.
And he used one of my favorite words in that too is position. So when people think stable, they think, okay, yes, this table that I'm on is stable because it has four legs, it has a top, it's nailed, it's good, it's not moving. But when it comes to the human body, that's not stability. Stability is not rigidness and tension and tone and holding a position because we're humans. We're constantly moving. We have to flow in and out of position, side to side movement. We need to have stability as we're shifting to the left, as we're rotating to the right. We need to have stability through all joints to be able to do that. And if we don't, that's when things become a problems. We start, okay, if we don't have stability and I'm going to go throw a baseball, what am I going to do to compensate to make sure I can throw that baseball? Because it's not like I'm not going to be able to throw a baseball. My body will find a way to throw a baseball. Will it let mobility and create hypermobility somewhere else because I don't have the stability? Or over time, will I injure myself because I don't have stability and I'm trying to recruit other muscles and other joints and bones to create stability for me that shouldn't be? And that is a big thing when it comes to stability. It is neuromuscular and motor control in an array of positions. And that's where yoga is great because yoga puts you in certain positions and it tells you, okay, you need to hold this position, feel what's going on, and now you need to now move on top of that position. So like one of the classic ones is the warrior pose, and they can take you step by step through that position, but it's telling your body, okay, you can hold this position for an extended amount of time and not feel like you're going to fall in and out of that position or lose balance. And we can do the same thing in the weight room. I am a big user of eccentrics and isometrics. So make people hold and feel and accept position and make their body aware of positions and how they're going to move.
Yeah.
And hypermobility is a big issue. And sometimes it is genetic. There will be people out there who are just more hypermobile and flexible than other people. That's fine. For those people who have these excessive ranges of motion that can get into crazy positions, they need to just be careful and be aware that they can go there, but that if they keep going, what are they compromising? Because sometimes at points they might be outside of joint range of motion. They might be on tendons and ligaments that are a little bit longer than normal, and they can't feel that because they're hypermobile. Their body just senses different things. So if you get someone like that or are someone like that, strength training, like Matt said, is a very, very good avenue to go down because you're telling those tissues, hey, you can have and create position, but now you need to strengthen in that position and hold tension in that position. And that'll give you more positional control of whatever joint you want to use, and it'll give you more stability in the long run of things.
Yeah, I think it's we like to talk about the extremes on both sides, and we like to talk about the shortcomings from each way, and we do promote the middle path. It's usually better. Um, but for the most part, I really have never had someone come to me and they are
Really?
hypermobile. I mean, it's
Huh.
funny because yeah, I typically see the other thing. I see people so tight they can't even like touch their back. Um, that's not true. I have one woman who's hypermobile and led to some flares in her lower back before we worked on like stabilizing her hips. But typically, and maybe this is me stereotyping, but I just feel like for the most part, people who pick up weights aren't afraid to compromise mobility. They would much rather feel strong and stable and give up mobility or flexibility to have that. And then consequently on the other side, the people who are close to being hypermobile, they are afraid of picking up weights because they don't want to be too bulky. They don't want to lose their mobility. So it's just funny because I really feel like it's an archetype or a character type that's like the yogis, the diehard yogis
Well, and
are so strong. They are very strong
oh yeah,
people, but a lot of the times I see bearing on the side of being hypermobile.
and why
And
do you see that?
go ahead.
Because it if they weren't hypermobile, they wouldn't be good at what they did. You know, I actually
Right.
one of
Okay.
my good friends,
Yeah, let's go with that.
and she's a Pilates instructor and yoga teacher, and she's hypermobile, and she knows this, and she's told me all the time, like, if I didn't have this, if I wasn't who I was, I wouldn't have the ability to do some of these yoga poses. And she's told me that she goes to classes and it's the same thing. Like most yogis in that scenario and situations, they are hypermobile because that's what they're good at. And I will 100% agree with you on that, is that to get them to almost like really strength train, and some will be okay with it, but some people think they're going to lose that and they kind of panic because that's what they're good at. And same thing with weightlifters. Weightlifters, powerlifters, they are strong. They don't need to be mobile. So you start giving them mobility, it's not the worst thing for them, but if you give them too much, they're not lifting the pounds they need to win worlds. Now, I know we're talking two extremes. So, where's the general population
No,
come in? Right in the middle. You got to have both for stability. So, you can
but I,
walk upstairs, you can run if you need to, you can bend down and tie your shoe and not have problems.
mm, right. But I love where you went with that because it's so true. That's like people end up gravitating towards stuff that they're good at and stuff that they feel like their system is capable of doing. And you think of what my mind goes to is sprinters and endurance athletes because like an endurance athlete, they want really mobile hips, but a sprinter is actually going to be more. Um, I shouldn't say more, but a sprinter's going to be more effective, I guess, at what they do with tighter
Oh, yeah,
hips because they want that quick stretch reflex and snapping back. So I think that's a really good point. People tend to gravitate towards what they're good at, but consequently, that's actually going to be a cue for you to be more aware of, am I leaning towards this because I'm just really good at it? Like, okay, well, if I want to get better and be more well rounded, I need to figure out what I'm not good at, and I need to make that a focus for a while.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of times people lose out on that. So that would be a great way of just keeping the balance in check. If you find that you're really strong, you're really stable person, you need to probably be doing some yoga classes. If you find that you love flexibility, you love how it opens you up, you love how you're so hypermobile. Excuse me, I shouldn't use that word.
Oh,
But you love that you're so mobile, then you probably need some strength training. You probably need to strengthen some of your
and
joints
if
and
and say
have that stability mobility coupling.
now say you're someone in the middle. You're the general population. And what do we do then? And that's why programming is important and key, because if we're always doing things we're good at, and look, I'm never going to be a power lifter. I'm also never going to be a yogi. So I'm kind of in this middle of what I want to be good at is a lot of things and a lot of movement variabilities. So my organism is fine and can survive, and I have balance and flow. How do I do that? Program accordingly. I'm not doing squats every day and just squats and leg press. I'm doing unilateral stuff. I'm doing lunges. I'm doing rotational stuff. There's ways to challenge stability within workouts. One of my favorite exercises is a single leg deadlift because it creates mobility and stability on one leg. Like you have to figure out how to stand on a left leg or a right leg, complete reps of an exercise, and then switch. And I think that's very key. Is a lot of people like to go to the gym and do what they're good at. Yes, we're going to go run on treadmills. We're going to do the seated leg press, the seated bench press. We might do some squats. What else are we going to do? Most stuff is going to be probably bilateral. So how do we get out of that? We create stability through isolating more joints. And that doesn't mean no, it does mean isolating exercises. So I'm not talking the bodybuilding's like, all right, we're going to do just chest today. No, I'm saying isolating exercises. Can we isolate the left leg, hamstring, and glute in a position? Can we isolate the right arm with left trunk rotation or right trunk rotation in a movement press? And that's how we create mobility and stability and keep our body fluid in those ranges of motion that we need.
And I think it is important before we go into body composition to just also mention that if you are on one of the extremes, it's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to create the stability and strength you need in that joint in just a couple sessions in the gym. And on the other side of things, you're not going to create the mobility that you need in your shoulders and your hips that you're lacking um, in just a couple weeks. This is going to take some time. We're talking about catch up work essentially. Unless you've been in that middle road your whole life, then it's going to be much easier to maintain your practice of having good mobility and your practice of having good stability and having them working in conjunction with each other. But if you've really only had one or the other, it's going to take some time. So that moves us into body composition, percent body fat, body density, the way you look, the way you feel, the way your system operates, whether it's optimally or non-ideal. Um, a good starting point would be to understand that for the average, we're talking about average body fat for um, men and women will be 25% to 30% for women and 18 to 25% for males. And yes, there is a degree which these are calculated based upon our bell curve of our population, but also based upon rates of disease based upon these body composition numbers as well. So basically if you're leaning on that 25-30% or higher range, you're getting more into higher risk for things like diabetes, heart disease, arthrosclerosis, COPD, um, the list goes on and
on,
on.
and that is a big precursor if the body composition is not in a good place.
Yeah. Um, look, fit men and fit women averages 21 to 25% for women and 14 to 18% for men. And if you're just thinking about it in a systems approach, you're thinking about an organism that needs to operate with a certain level of physical stress on it to promote it to maintain a well oiled machine, right? So if we just were born and we just laid around all the time, you can imagine that there wouldn't be enough stress for the body to promote lean muscle mass or to be able to break down and partition fat cells for fuel adequately. Um, on the other side, if we were born and we mm, max ourselves out on all fronts physically and aerobically and neuromuscularly every single day, we can be the extreme athlete who's doing anything and everything they can to keep their performance as high as they can. And there's not a good correlation between longevity and extreme athletes. So if you're someone who wants to, be the best version of yourself for as many days as you possibly can, you probably care more about longevity than, how well you perform in the gym that day. You also probably are combining your short-term goals and your long-term goals. So, come back to our analogies of someone who is has their foot on the gas, pedal to the metal their whole life, and then the opposite of just not going anywhere their whole life. Both are utilizing stress in a net negative manner, meaning that the overall outcome of that system is not a good one on both cases. So having adequate physical fitness routines in terms of aerobic, in terms of neuromuscular, in terms of the regenerative process we talk about, things like autophagy or sleep. you know, these systems are pretty easily manipulated. Walk up a hill, run every now and then, use the stairs, lift things up and put them down every now and then, sleep, breathe. These systems are already in place, but if you do that and you have an adequate practice of self maintenance and self care, you'll maintain a fit body fat percentage, which is going to just keep your risk of chronic disease and illness super low. You're gonna feel a lot happier and better because you're gonna have you know hormones firing, neurotransmitters firing efficiently, and you're gonna look good too. And that's just the trophy at the end of all your hard work. And looking good is just the byproduct of having all these sound practices in a healthy routine.
And it keeps the body going too. As you said, one of my favorite studies showed that 64% of performance increases comes from change in lean body mass compositions. So that's really powerful saying. And this study was done on athletes, but it can be applied to everything. So developing lean body mass is a key to improving performance. And you'll see time and time again, and you can read that physical performances, say, you know, times on the 40-yard dash improve. Usually the thing that's improves first is body composition. So if you can change that, and if you have young athletes, you change that, you're going to see an increase in performance. Now, let's take that and we'll apply it to the general population. If you start to increase body composition for in a good way, we're increasing lean body mass, which means fat-free mass or fat mass drops, you're going to have benefits. You're going to see increase in performance of the human body, the human systems, metabolisms. are going to improve. DNA translation is going to improve. Everything's going to improve over time. And the other big thing is as we go and as we age, our bodies are efficient things. And it has muscle mass, but if it doesn't use the muscle mass, it's going to get rid of it. So one of the big things is as we get older is decline of muscle quality and muscle mass. And then you get older, we get sarcopenia, which is basically our body is just shedding its muscle mass, and then we get into a lot of trouble because we can be susceptible to falls, we become weak, we become frail through the bones. So keeping a good body composition of lean body mass, fat-free mass compared to fat mass is very important for overall health as we age. And it doesn't mean you have to be looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger when he was competing in bodybuilding. But if you look at him now, he's still working out, he's still lifting, he's still just trying to put on muscle mass as best he can at his age because it's optimal for healthy living. And I think that's important when it comes to body composition. We're not just talking about fat mass, we're talking about the whole thing together, which they are separately can be very important because if we, like you said, if we have that higher levels of body fat percentage, we're starting to get into this slippery slope where metabolic functions start to decline, brain functions start to shut down a bit because it's so used to driving metabolic functions that are too high. So we have to look at that as okay, what are we actually doing here? And the way to improve body composition is by physical activities, working out, resistance training, aerobic training, running, cycling, whatever modality you choose, but it should be done often and it should be done frequently or even daily to maintain the levels that we have. I mean, our body's an ever changing organism and we have to keep changing it every single day.
I love where you're going with that because of my food for thought quote, which Mechie hasn't even heard of yet today, so he doesn't even know.
Ooh.
But um, yeah, it is about finding new ways to challenge your system day in and day out. And I know for a lot of people that sucks sometimes because who wants to challenge themselves, right? But it's important. It's a need in order to if you in order to promote your body to live its best life physically and mentally and um, be rather than just alive but living, you do have to look to challenge your systems and keep them in tip top shape because it's not like you can really, you know, it's not like I do have to say one thing about the Arnold Schwarzenegger point. It's not that he's really trying to add muscle. It's that he's just if he didn't target his lean muscle mass, it's gonna just keep deteriorating. But if he keeps stimulating it, keeps pushing that boulder up the hill, he might gain a little bit every now and then. He might add a pound of
Correct.
muscle every couple of months, but he's not looking to like bulk up. He's just keeping it going. And if you stop pushing that boulder up the hill, it's going to come rolling down right away pretty quick. And it takes 2 weeks to get into shape. It takes 1 week to fall out of shape. So another point too is it's not like we can spot reduce. We can't spot reduce fat in a certain area. But if I target my muscle in an area, when I go to store energy in that area, my body's going to start repairing the muscle and storing any excess energy into the muscle as glycogen because it's like, oh, we got to get this muscle ready to fire again. Less so than it's going to store it into fat cells. So it just it is a little bit like if you don't use it, you lose it. But in terms of body composition, promoting a lean body mass and targeting the lean muscle mass on your system is just going to do wonders for your health, for your bone density, for neural functioning, for just movement patterns and any compensations that could build in the body can usually happen when people gain a lot of weight. A lot of injuries happen after someone uh, gets a first little injury, it throws them off their routine. They fall out of their habits. They gain 10, 15 pounds, and now they just blew their
Yeah.
back out because they picked up something in an uncomfortable position, and they've added 15 pounds to
And
their
how
system. So
so important. So you take that scenario, right? That person blows their back out. Where's their mobility and stability? They've gained weight. They've lost that, right? So they lose that. Then the next step, what's their regeneration look like? If their body composition is bad and they have higher body fat percentage and their system's running off of cortisol, we're looking at regeneration that's poor. So
so you're probably creating inflammation in your
yeah,
joints. You've probably not allowed your body to clean up itself at all, and you've probably maintained your eating habits but dropped your physical activity. So you're probably at a caloric surplus. You probably have a leaky gut at this point because your body hasn't been able to keep up with its digestion. And you have a host of other issues. You have pain here, joint issues here, fogginess here, fatigue at this time of the day. And it's all stemmed to probably poor
then
regeneration.
the next step is the body's going to just be in dysregulation and it's just going to try to hold on to the best it can, but it's not going to function the way it should. And that's the importance of not all this, but like body composition. People need to be aware of and how important it can be for other aspects of their own health.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think that kind of wraps us up this week. Um, I want to end with our wrap up, and then we'll get into our food for thought. But you have anything you want to regeneration, stability, and body composition?
I think I'm
You got to marry one, kill one. No, I'm
I
kidding.
think I'm good. I think my last little segment, I that was my closing.
All right, all right. I
Need
like
that.
it. I like it. Um, yeah, I feel like we hit the topics home today, so I'm just going to end with my food for thought, and it's just the best thing about the future is it comes one day at a time. This is by Abe Lincoln. And I think it's just a really applicable quote because, in terms of regeneration, in terms of creating stability, or fighting against hypermobility, or fighting against to being too stable, or adjusting your body composition, these aren't things that happen overnight, and they're not things that you change one time and then they're set and you can just forget about it. It's these little changes are going to go a long way. If you're having trouble sleeping, it's about setting an alarm to be more disciplined about when you'll get to bed, and then it's about maybe having a better hygiene around. You read a couple pages before you go to bed, so it helps kind of shut down your system and fall to sleep better. And then in terms of stability or mobility, you work on just little incremental goals here and there, whether it's soft tissue work, or it's strength in an arm bar, or a banded bridge. You're just doing little bits at a time. Take it one day at a time, and I just think I just think it applies because I think with any of these topics, and especially the ones we talked about today, a lot of the times I find people's problem was their lack of consistency with what they were doing. Is they were headed in the right direction, but because they didn't get that positive feedback or the reward system kicking in at the right time, they just stopped doing it. They stopped being diligent about what because they weren't getting the body composition they wanted, or they stopped focusing on going to yoga because they just didn't get the mobility they wanted, or they stopped weight training because they didn't know how to, or they stopped caring about this stuff because they don't know how to really see if they're stressed out or not, or if they're getting enough sleep or not. So just best thing about the future is it comes one day at a time. Just one day at a time. That's all you can focus on. And we'll catch you next week. Live long and prosper. Thanks for listening. We hope you gained something from this episode. Our mission is to help people live their best life, both physically and mentally. Check out thinkfitnesslife.com for additional resources and schedule a complimentary assessment with one of us. We're always here to help.